That's plugged in.
Yeah.
Is Jim French still in the same position?
Yes.
Yeah.
He might be, oh no, I think he's on vacation. I think he's on.
Shake-ups, never know anymore.
Yeah. Even.
You ready?
We think
So, yeah, I think, okay, perfect, yeah, I was gonna say, the way Deanna does it, she usually just shares the screen.
Morning, Mark. How are you doing? Hey, man, how are you?
Good morning.
One more time. I can sit there. Is that right? Yeah.
Do I have a quorum, Pamela,
Yes.
for our group? But
I think so. Kelly also said she was gonna be here, so she might just be running a little late. Oh, I got you.
So here, so your position, where now?
You gotta deal with me for at least 2 or 3 minutes.
all right, well, the clock has struck 9 o'clock, so we'll call the April 23rd meeting of the Indiana Recycling Market Development Board to order. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for, suffering through the traffic jams this morning, and appreciate everybody's effort to put this together in the nice little folders with all the information on it. Great.
Very nice.
And we're going to turn it over to you, Pamela, to run through the online. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Pamela Guerrero, the Section Chief for Recycling Programs for items Office of Program Support. All microphones are currently muted. For attendance tracking, please take a moment to write your name and affiliation in the chat box. We will be taking questions and comments from participants of today's meeting. All participants will be able to unmute themselves and ask questions or make comments at the appropriate time. If you have questions or technical issues during the presentation, please use the raise hand or chat feature. For those on the phone, if you have a question or comment, you can raise your hand by pressing 9, and we will call on you at the appropriate time. When called upon, you will need to unmute your phone by pressing 6. If any members of the media have joined us, please utilize the chat feature, or you might email us at rmbpgrants@idem.in.gov. with any questions or if you would like to schedule an interview. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on IDEM's website, recycling.in.gov. With that, I will turn the meeting over to Bruce, the board chair, who will be leading today's meeting.
Thank you, Pamela. And the first order of business is the consideration and approval of the January 22nd RMDB meeting transcripts or summary. Did everyone have the opportunity to review it? Any changes, modifications? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Kratz, and a second by Ms. Henry. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Yeah,
I think, I did not vote on that since I wasn't here, so I don't know how you want to record that.
good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, sorry for being late.
Sorry, you're dealing with traffic, I'm sure.
And animal issues.
Well, the next item on the agenda is agency updates. Mr. Clint Woods, or I guess Commissioner Clint Woods and Executive Director Joshua Bain.
So thanks so much for having me. Thanks to the chair and to the board for you got a full agenda. We really appreciate the chance to provide some high-level updates about what's going on at IDEM. We're very busy, and one thing I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity is Josh Bain is our relatively new Executive Director of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs, which is a new role at IDEM that builds on traditional Legislative Director role. And we've had a lot going on legislatively, both with the General Assembly and the short session in 2026, but also a lot going on elsewhere too. We actually spent the last few days in Washington, D.C. meeting with our delegation and our counterparts at USCPA, talking about a lot of things we've been up to at IDEM, but I wanted to first and foremost thank you all for your service and your work on behalf of the Recycling Market Development Board. It is not lost on us how incredibly important your time and expertise are in guiding an important program at IDEM. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule, and we got a full agenda, so we'll try and be super brief, but I did want to give you all a few quick updates in terms of IDEM personnel, some stuff we're looking at internally, some priorities we have, and then let that kind of lead into a few efforts that we have to implement some changes that happened during the legislative session that may defer to Josh a little bit on some of the details related to Senate Enrolled Act 277, House Enrolled Act 1003, and maybe a couple of other bills that are going to be taking up a substantial portion of our time as we look at implementation beginning with an effective date in most cases of July 1st of this year. But I think I will say overall, IDEM, we've got a lot going on. So I know yesterday was Earth Day, so it's always a good chance to reflect on some things. And among different things that we do ahead of and with Earth Day, I wanted to just note a couple of items that I think are really high priorities for us. One is, I'm not sure the final numbers are in, but I think ultimately we'll probably have reached more than 10,000 Hoosier students where IDEM employees are going out and providing lessons to elementary and middle school students primarily throughout the state about air, land, and water quality and recycling, engaging them where they're at, hopefully inspiring the next generation of environmental leaders in our state, which is an incredibly exciting program and one that I really appreciate Pam and her team and Carl and the Office of Program Support team for helping to coordinate that effort across the agency. We get usually hundreds of volunteers from the IDEM workforce to reach folks in all corners of the state. We also had kind of a concerted effort on a few other things around Earth Day this year. One being, you may see or have already seen, in your part of the state, our regional office directors. We have 4 regional offices. Obviously, we have laboratories here in Shadeland, and then the majority of our staff are in our central office in the Indiana Government Center North. But each of our regional office directors are actually going to be rolling out op-eds to culminate, I think, a couple things. One, Earth Day is a great chance for us to reflect on the work that we do at IDEM, but also the others do from the bottom up to help improve air, water, and land quality in the state of Indiana. We also are our 40th anniversary, so as of July 1st this year, IDEM will be 40 years old, which is a lifetime. We've got probably a majority of our employees are younger than the agency, but a good chance to look back, but also look forward. And so we've got some regional kind of opinion pieces that help lay out, one, making sure folks know that we've got regional offices. 2, reflect on some of the progress we've seen in certain parts of the state. So there was a piece last week with our new Northwest Indiana Office Director, Mallory Median, outlining in Northwest Indiana some dramatic improvement around the Grand Calumet area of concern that Carl and others have been really actively involved in. Dramatic improvement in air quality in the state. There's still more work to be done in Northwest Indiana, a lot of progress there. But also some of those trends are accelerating. We're seeing really great news, and I think, and obviously, the work that you all do around recycling market development has seen significant progress in recent time. I'll say, I think I've seen a couple of important milestones in the last year. So I've been on the job since February of last year, and we've seen the investments that have been made through this program be realized through exciting ribbon cutting, but actual work at the Blue Polymer Republic Services Center with investments from this board. Just in the last couple of weeks with the ribbon cutting around the waste management MRF in Indianapolis, that will be an enabling facility with investments from this program and this board to ultimately get us to universal curbside recycling in the city of Indianapolis, which will be a great accomplishment in the next couple of years. So, I think a lot to be proud of, a lot to be excited about, a lot to share, because sometimes some of the positive stories are occasionally missed. So I'll say, in terms of our team, we have just under 800 folks serving at IDEM right now, and a great diversity. We've celebrated late last year a number of our employees who had 5-year milestones, all the way up to 45 years of service, so longer than we've been an agency. We've got folks who served with us for more than 50 years, so obviously no in IDEM inside and out. We've also had a lot of new folks and new faces, and so we've got a great team, great folks who I know you've had a chance to work with, like Pamela Guerrero, who's doing a fantastic job with our recycling and environmental education and quality assurance and policy work, and a few other new faces. So I mentioned Josh. We've also had a few departures. So Deanna Garner, who I know you all have had a chance to work with in the past, has moved on to new opportunities, and Bob Luger, our previous assistant commissioner for the Office of Program Support, has taken a new role overseeing strategic projects at Department of Natural Resources. So I wanted to thank them for their great work that has helped to enable this board and this program as it's been implemented over the last 20 plus years, I think, since we took it over from Congress. A couple of things that I just wanted to maybe mention to folks in case it's helpful, is we've got a lot going on internally, so I think we've onboarded, in addition to some of those new faces that may be more familiar to you, about 100 people in the last year, so they're an agency of 800. That's a lot of new blood, which is great, and folks with diverse backgrounds, some new to state government and fresh out of school, some that have joined us from other agencies, like Pam and others, that bring a lot of expertise, and then others who, left us and then came back like a boomerang, bringing fresh perspectives from the private sector or work elsewhere. So really exciting, and I think one of our really concerted efforts is, as we look at challenges that are not unique to IDEM, of thinking about succession planning and the retirement cliff, where we're going to lose way too many people way too soon, but we've got about a quarter of our workforce is retirement eligible today. In some of our programs, that number is even higher. So thinking about how we grow the next set of leaders at IDEM, how we think about roles and responsibilities, and the work that we do is really driving a lot of our efforts. So we've done a few things that I won't go too far into details, but kind of created some smaller teams. So not just our senior leadership team of our assistant commissioners and deputy assistant commissioners and chief financial officers and others, but a larger group of all the people managers of the agencies, but also the thought leaders, the subject matter experts, and some concerted discussions around how to be great leaders, what tools we need, how we can meet folks where we're at, because it's a real challenge working in state government right now. It's always been a challenge. You don't get paid enough and you get yelled at too much. But at the same time, there are folks that are really passionate about the work that they do. So how do we keep those great people, and how do we grow the leaders of the future? So very concerted efforts around training and development of some of those skills, so that we can hopefully have the next generation of excellent section chiefs and branch chiefs and assistant commissioners and otherwise. We have implemented internally, and it's not super external facing, but hopefully you'll be seeing it in the work that happens at IDEM, around a strategic plan, which is really the first that we've done in decades, that help to outline some key priorities for the next few years, but really some long-term planning for the next 40. So where do we want to be as an agency? How do we help to meet folks where they're at? How do we think about things like customer service and our core responsibilities? And I think that's generated some really good discussions, some really important high priority items, some areas that we got a lot of work to do, but also some exciting ones about how do we break down some of the silos. We've got really great leaders in our air and water and land and legal and finance and operations and our Office of Program Support. How do we better integrate that work where folks may have like jobs across some of those individual offices? How do we integrate new technology opportunities that are presented by artificial intelligence that are both opportunities but also challenges for state governments that don't always move super fast when it comes to the latest technology, but we're going to be overtaken by it if we don't have a plan. So I think some good conversations that we've been having around that strategic plan and kind of a 3-year arc of where we're not trying to eat the elephant all at once, but at least pursue some high priority initiatives and projects and activities around that strategic plan and certain themes, and then ultimately how that manifests itself in the individual work. Because while we have 800 people, and some of them have similar titles, we've got a lot of senior environmental managers and environmental managers, each of those jobs are very, very unique, as you know, from the work that happens at IDEM. And so how do we make sure that some of those concepts and ultimately the agency's mission and the vision that we want to achieve, which is serving every Hoosier to improve environmental quality while also striking a great balance with economic activity, how do we make sure that that manifests itself for every individual and empower them in their jobs? So I'll maybe just say two other quick things that I just wanted to note. I think I'll maybe cover just a little bit at a high level about Senate Enrolled Act 277, and let Josh talk a little bit more about some of the details that came out of the legislative session. But I will say, again, thank you for the work that you do. One of the efforts that we had legislatively this year, there was a broader effort around boards and commissions that required a whole bunch of work from us on the front ends, a little bit of a black box, some uncertainty, and then at least we now know where things are going on a couple of fronts. But then what was our agency bill that ultimately was enacted is Senate Enrolled Act 277. We looked at our 4 statutory boards and commissions. So Recycling Market Development Board, our Excess Liability Trust Fund, so underground storage tanks operated by our petroleum branch. It has a Financial Assurance Board that we call a FAB. Then we've got a third, which is a panel that we've never really stood up in the past, but we're kind of required to have under state and federal law, but we're looking at starting to implement basically a compliance advisory panel that's designed under the Federal Clean Air Act to help small entities to understand their obligations under stationary source regulation under the Clean Air Act. So I think we've got some appointments that will become forthcoming to stand up that board. And then our fourth is our Environmental Rules Board, that oversees the bulk of our rulemaking as well as notification for non-rule policies, which is a larger, more diverse constituency group that helps to advise us in the rulemaking process, which at IDEM is extremely rigorous. So those 4 boards we take very seriously, and unless you probably didn't, we actually have taken some of the energy around what is the value of having transparent and folks who hold our feet to the fire, who bring expertise and are willing to volunteer or share their time and expertise with us as an agency. We want to do the same. So one thing that is an animating thing for me is sometimes people have concerns or criticisms about things that IDEM does, and for the most part, about 98% of the time, if somebody's complaining about something that IDEM is up to, we can usually blame our federal counterparts and say, well, that's something that's in federal environmental law, or that's an EPA rule, or maybe that's a requirement of a grant agreement. But I think we need to make sure that we're shaping those things. If we agree that maybe that doesn't make sense, or maybe there's some unnecessary paperwork that is keeping us from doing the most with taxpayer dollars when it comes to improving the environment, how are we shaping those federal rules? So a couple things that we've undertaken there that I did want to emphasize. One is a very concerted effort, which actually is now, we're the only state in the country, this is now enshrined in state law. We were doing it anyway, but in the last year we filed more comments with US EPA than IDEM had in the 10 years prior. So when there's a proposed regulation under the Clean Air Act or Safe Drinking Water Act or Resource Conservation Recovery Act, almost every major national rulemaking, we filed substantive comments, often with other sister agencies or the Attorney General's office or the Indiana State Department of Agriculture, some of the agencies in our energy and natural resource vertical, and had a lot of success, I think, in shaping some of those rules. We've seen our specific suggestions on proposals be implemented in final rules. And ultimately, I think, puts us in a really good spot to make sure that those rules that ultimately will be responsible for implementing at IDEM serve Hoosiers really well. A second thing that we've done is, I think, near and dear to me, and I think probably near and dear to you, considering the amount of time you're spending on a Thursday morning helping us, but we've also said, hey, we would love to shape these rules on the front end when the science is being processed at EPA, and EPA has an even larger number of both statutory and non-statutory boards and commissions, technical and representative. And we haven't always been part of that process sometimes. And we said, hey, we've got really smart people at our agency. They got way too much on their plate, but if you're working on Safe Drinking Water Act issues and you have a ton of expertise in how to develop maximum contaminant levels, why don't we have you have a seat at the table before EPA ever gets to a proposed regulation? So I'm excited to share that in the last month, the kind of 2 really impactful EPA statutory advisory committees, one's called the Science Advisory Board, that was created by Congress in 1978. Then one's called the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee that advises on national ambient air quality standards. For the first time ever, IDEM has representatives on those 2 boards. And actually on the Science Advisory Board, there's 37 members announced last week by Administrator Zeldin. Of those 37, 4 hail from Indiana. We have more folks at the table shaping the science behind future EPA regulations than any other state in the country, which is really exciting. Including a couple of folks from our team who've got more letters after their name than an outfit. They've got really smart folks who have doctorates in exciting areas that are going to provide technical expertise, but also I think bring a perspective of where the rubber hits the road when it comes to environmental regulation at a state environmental agency. So wanted to make sure you knew that your enthusiasm of helping our agency out is also animating our work to hopefully help our federal counterparts get it right. And then I just wanted to talk real briefly, and I kick it to Josh maybe for a little bit of a slightly deeper download, but I think it was an interesting legislative session. I'll just observe, I joked and probably should stop joking about this, that after last December's votes on congressional redistricting, people were really excited to talk about anything else. And so surprisingly, despite it being a relatively short session, a non-budget session, I think there were a lot of pieces of legislation, some ambitious efforts, and one of them was what was a concept that we had talked about a little bit last year, both internally and externally, but a effort to review and in many ways modernize and clean up and update our state environmental code, which is codified at Title 13 of the Indiana Code. I'll say we are very blessed with a very engaged legislature. As you all know, we've gotten multiple directives for this program and board over recent years, but a lot of our programs, we've got folks who I think respect the agency's work on both sides of the aisle in both the House and Senate. But we do have a lot of state provisions that hadn't been looked at in a number of years. So most of that code had been recodified in 1996, a lot of it predated that. Many provisions that just were overtaken by events, provisions that were allowed us, for example, in our Clean Air Act permitting programs to bridge the gap after the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments, where we had certain programs under Title V that needed to be implemented with 5-year permits that have now been obviously reissued multiple times since then. A handful of other provisions, some that are just purely outdated. A provision related to nuclear energy facility permitting that you could tell was outdated because it asked us to develop a permitting program for radiation as well as nuclear energy facility permits. We're not allowed to do that actually under federal law. It's preempted by a Supreme Court decision in 1983. But also it was old because it asked us to coordinate with the Atomic Energy Commission, which hasn't existed since 1973. So it was a little bit of a dated provision. But some things like that, some other fairly boring things, about 50 references to the administrative code, so where our IDEM rules are housed as overseen by the Environmental Rules Board, which can sometimes make some sense to refer to the administrative code in state statute, but that also creates some instability. We discovered about half of those were defunct references, so if you tried to go to the administrative code, it didn't actually provide the definition you were looking for. So we cleaned up a lot of stuff like that, working very closely with the chairs of the House and Senate Environmental Affairs Committee, Chairman Niemeyer and Chairman Baird, and then a number of other provisions. I will say at its core, this does slim down Title 13, make sure that we're focused on our core responsibilities. There's no impact, frankly, for a lot of our day-to-day work. A lot of the things that you see from IDEM, whether it be recycling market grant programs or electronic waste or environmental education or efforts around compliance technical assistance, our core permitting, rulemaking, compliance and enforcement, research and monitoring work is unchanged. We have expansive tools under both state and federal law that are enforceable under most federal environmental statutes to take action against anyone who's in violation. And that's tools like revoking the permits and civil penalties and looking at taking emergency actions as necessary, but also very expansive rulemaking authority to address any issues that we need to through mostly the Environmental Rules Board. So that effort I think is going to take a lot for us to implement. It's a lot of changes. It's a lot that I think matches up with what the agency does. There are some new directives in there. We are asked, for example, we're the first state in the country to be directed to, in the spirit of cooperative federalism, with which all of our federal environmental laws were written, to make sure we're shaping those federal environmental laws and regulations in a way that serves Indiana through comments and petitions and litigation and grants. And so we're taking that very seriously. But there's also some other potential areas that were non-discretionary duties or could create deadlines for us that I think we've made sure to slim down, make sure we're getting the most environmental bang for our buck. There are some reporting requirements, both for IDEM and for third parties, that we discovered nobody had ever read. Some things that we had to report to the legislature every year that we asked, and they said, no, we've never looked at that report before. So we said, can we just put that on our website so we don't have to send it to you every year? And so some things like that I think will make us more transparent and more consistent, but not necessarily as deadline driven for certain reporting requirements, some that others have sent to us. And so this all, I just will say, is ahead of an effort, a couple of different efforts that I'm very excited about, some under Governor Braun's executive orders around red tape reduction, opportunities for looking at our administrative code. We'll be reviewing kind of top to bottom our administrative code across water and then land and air over the next 3 calendar years. Some efforts to review our non-rule policies that sometimes help to provide interpretive information on our regulations, but in some cases we've got things on the books that have been 30 pages of solid waste permit guidance from 1983 that maybe we need to update at a minimum, if not maybe look at consolidating or including in the administrative code. So some other efforts that I think will follow. As I've been involved in a few other state efforts around this, I think there's 2 important takeaways. One is there's not a whole lot of excess stuff at state environmental agencies like us. We tend to follow what the federal government says, and almost everything we do is a non-discretionary thing that's required under federal law. So there doesn't tend to be that many opportunities for red tape reduction, but we're taking a lot of suggestions. We had a public solicitation process last year. And then the second is there's often not a similar effort around the state code that the legislature oversees. So I think this is a really important effort, Senate Rule Act 277, to help shape the work that we'll be doing to make sure that we've got the most modern state environmental code, the most modern state administrative code when it comes to environmental matters of any state in the country, which is really exciting. Because the federal government's not doing the same thing. You know, it's not lost on me that the vast majority of our staff who implement the Federal Clean Air Act or Safe Drinking Water Act or the Clean Water Act, that those statutes were last updated for most of them before they were born. And so they still serve us really well, but they haven't necessarily anticipated the environmental challenges that we face in 2026. So having it at the very least a modern code that our legislature has said, we agree with this. And then I think there were some similar efforts both within our Senate Enrolled Act 277 and then a parallel effort under House Enrolled Act 1003 that changed it quite a bit over the legislative session. I'll let Josh talk about it a little bit, to make some conforming changes for our boards and commissions that I think overall improve transparency, provide a lot of clarity. As you all know, for some of the more niche boards and programs that we operate, there's not a long line of people waiting to volunteer their time and effort to help shape financial assurance requirements for our petroleum branch. And we want to make sure that we're able to serve the governor well so that he can make gubernatorial appointments as appropriate, that we've got perspectives that are valuable with expertise and from different backgrounds, but also that we've got some fresh perspectives and the ability to have folks appointed to make sure that we've got a quorum for boards like this, and that the work can be done, and that ultimately the statutory responsibilities for things like recycling market development are overseen by a board that really serves us well and is transparent and ultimately holds our feet to the fire as an agency, because that's what we're looking for. So there's a few changes that I think will do a couple things for us. One, make sure that those boards have been reviewed, and in fact, for me, I think it's very valuable for the legislature to say, we think that board needs to exist, and the fact that it's created by state statute is not something that we take lightly. Secondly, I think it really enables us to potentially look at opportunities to leverage those boards and commissions and the expertise. So I'll just mention one effort that I think we would love to look in the future at the way that the RMDB could potentially help us out. We're asking our Environmental Rules Board to help kind of oversee some of the administrative code cleanup work we're doing, but also conduct a review that's required under Title 13 of our various environmental fees. And so many of those fees haven't been updated in decades. We did have an update to our Title 5 air permit fees a couple of years ago that was passed legislatively. But think about how the expertise in this room, the expertise on our petroleum branch financial assurance board, the expertise on our compliance advisory panel working with small entities, could potentially be integrated, and even ways that we might be able to leverage those boards working together and talking to each other and sharing the work that's been done. So we started a first effort a couple months ago where actually our financial assurance board chair reported out to the Environmental Rules Board, and we're going to do the same thing in the opposite direction here shortly, but trying to have a little bit more cross-pollination across some of these programs, so that I think there's strength in those numbers and visibility that our advisory committees have. So with that, I may just pause and kick it over to Josh. And as I mentioned, Josh had just joined us about 3 months ago, so he's still relatively new, but has brought, I think, a great perspective to us and great background working with the General Assembly, working in the city of Indianapolis in his off time, but also working in environmental education and energy education previously. And so I'll maybe let Josh talk a little bit about maybe other key takeaways from this last legislative session, and then we'll let you get to the rest of the very busy agenda. But thanks for the chance to speak with you.
Yeah, good morning. As the commissioner said, my name is Josh Bain. Sorry, my voice sounds a little weird. I've been under the weather the past week or so, and fortunately the commissioner and Hillary had to deal with me out in DC the past 3 weeks, lugging around a sick guy to go meet with our federal delegation out there. But before this, I worked for an energy nonprofit, so I helped smaller, mostly rural communities look at big energy projects as economic development opportunities, teach them how local ordinances work, economic development agreements, community benefit agreements, things like that. Before that, I worked in our Indiana General Assembly for a few sessions, and then whenever I'm not doing this in another life, I also serve on City County Council in Indianapolis. Been doing that about 6 years now, so I do recognize some familiar faces here in the room. But first off, just want to let you know kind of what our legislative team does. It's 2 of us. It's myself and then Alex Goodnight, who's our deputy legislative liaison. A lot of times people might think that they're lobbying the legislature, and we certainly talk to our legislators and other branches in the executive offices, but we don't really lobby in the traditional sense. We're not over there not necessarily advocating for bills or against bills. Really, we do our best just to provide technical guidance and expert guidance from the professional staff at IDEM. So, and a lot of the times, usually when I'm meeting with a legislator, there's one of our assistant commissioners with me and one of our deputy assistant commissioners there, really to provide them the nuanced and the expert feedback on that. But just wanted to kind of set that groundwork. So, you know, when I'm talking about things that the legislature does, you know, you kind of have that understanding of how we interact with them. So as the commissioner said, Senate Enrolled Act 277, that was our agency bill. Most of the time, the agency will have one big omnibus bill that are things that they've worked on over the interim. So for us, there was something called the Friday Book Club that the commissioner and a lot of senior staff participated in, where they sat down, went through Title 13 word for word. And I've been told that it wasn't exactly riveting, and that lucky I came on when I did, about halfway through the legislative session, which, as a side note, it was great to have nice long on-ramp, you know, nothing too controversial going on with that. But the commissioner, senior staff, Office of Legal Counsel sat down every Friday for months going through Title 13, and that's ultimately how we ended up with 277. There were also a ton of public feedback that we received, over 1,400 pages of comments that we took into consideration, and all that led to Senate Enrolled Act 277, which again, we hadn't looked at Title 13 since the 90s. So there were a lot of conflicting statutes that we updated. We took the mindset that it's best to have things enshrined in Indiana code as opposed to going back and forth between administrative code. The more that we can be accountable to our elected officials, the ones who are elected into office and who pass legislation and enshrining things in Indiana code, the better. So I do want to make it abundantly clear that all of our environmental protections remain intact. Our core regulatory authorities don't change. You know, if you read some news articles or, you know, looked online during the past session, there was definitely some misinformation out there, and we responded to a lot of the media reports that were out there, and just about everybody took our feedback, adjusted the stories and everything. But you know, you would read a headline saying that we don't permit things anymore. It's like, well, actually, we didn't touch a single permit within Indiana code, so all that still remains intact. We still implement our delegated duties through Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, all those, they all still remain intact. I know that there was also some headlines or maybe some talking points going out there that Senate Enrolled Act 277 could possibly risk our delegated authority, because, you know, there's obviously a long process, but the EPA wanted to claw back some of those programs and implement at the federal level. There's a process for that, and there were some headlines that, well, maybe we were going to be at risk for that, when actually the exact opposite's true, because there were some occasions where, let's say if a new rule comes in place at the federal level that we have to implement, and we don't have time before a legislative session to implement that, or we don't have time to propose a rule, then, you know, there'd be a certain board, like the Environmental Rules Board, would have to oversee a couple permits. Well, it's a federal rule that you can't have a board with appointees on it that receive permits from IDEM that also issue permits from IDEM, which makes total sense. But, you know, there was that small little instance where that could happen. So, you know, we clean things like that up. So as you can tell, we definitely got into the weeds on that, but definitely want to make it abundantly clear that the day-to-day work of IDEM remains the same, and it just gives us more time and flexibility to focus on most impactful environmental outcomes possible. Some things I think probably most pertinent to this group, because I don't necessarily think you want me to go down the list on fruit trees, on manure lagoons, and on berms and things like that. You know, it's probably not too pertinent to this group, but originally when Senate Enrolled Act 277 was drafted, there was a sunset provision in there for the RMDB. Want to make it abundantly clear, it was not, it did not eliminate the RMDB, just sunset it after 5-6 years. The goal of that is to make sure that our state legislature and IDEM is more periodically reviewing its rules, its statutes, its programs, just to make sure that they're being updated and refreshed from time to time. That was ultimately removed from the bill for a few reasons, potential fiscal impacts, but also there was House Enrolled Act 1003 that was a House agenda bill that was moving, and that sunset the RMDB board after, or RMDB after 1 year. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that's not something that we were truly involved with, or we're pushing for. It's not we did not request that the RMDB be sunset after 1 year, but just maybe want to touch on that in case you had heard about that or seen it in the news, or if there's any chit chat about it. It's not something that we were involved with. Ultimately, that was removed from House Enrolled Act 1003 as well. So ultimately, there's no fundamental big changes to the RMDB, but there were a couple maybe smaller changes that I think would be relevant for the board. Part of that has to do with our recycling goals. Right now we have a goal of 50% be recycled, and the legislature added the word, 2 words, or diverted. So 50% be recycled or diverted. Now we don't have legislative intent here in Indiana, so we can't go back and look to see when that was originally drafted, why it was, and kind of get into the minds of legislators at that time. But one would have to think that the goal of that is to keep it out of our landfills if possible. So adding the or diverted there kind of aligns us with some of our other sustainability partners in the state who maybe use incineration as a part of that. Thinking we have some facilities here that are zero waste and they use incineration as a part of that. There's also some updates to provisions for recyclers in the state. So you used to be had to report your recycling activities quarterly, and this kind of goes to what the commissioner was talking about, where are we being overly burdensome, or are we having too many regulations in place at any given time? So if a recycler is having to submit something quarterly, but we look at it once a year, it would maybe be easier for that facility if they only had to report it once a year as well, and they could focus more on the day-to-day activities within their business. So that's that was a change that we made. And then you may have also heard about some shall to may requirements. So it's important to note that there's still over 1,400 shall requirements within Title 13, which are things that the department has to do no matter what. We don't have a choice, nothing we can do about it. And there's additional thousands of requirements within our delegated programs like Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, etc. But a couple of those that maybe touch the RMDB is that now it simply just says that the board may approve up to $2 million in grants. The goal of that is just to reduce the legal ambiguity there and possible litigation risk. Definitely is not intended to change the program authority at all. So again, just want to make it clear that the goal of that was just to kind of streamline our processes, reduce some of the redundant codes, and then make sure that we are aligned with our federal requirements, strengthen our legal clarity, and again, just to allow IDEM to focus time on the most substantial environmental outcomes that we have. So happy to maybe answer any questions you have, but those are really the big changes here that have to do with the RMDB.
And Judge, if you mind me just one?
Yeah, please.
Which is just to maybe.
So he was here a lot longer than I was.
No, I think it
before
was
the
a
process.
great job, and I think one of our goals that did not get achieved for weirdly jurisdictional reasons was, it drives me crazy that the RMDB is the the recycling market grant program and development board is the only thing that IDEM administers that is not in Title 13, it's in Title 4, and it's frustrating to me that I have to go to a different part of the code to read about the work that you all do. So we were also attempting to shift that over because there was some confusion, I think, around some Office of Energy Development funds and some other items too. So we may go back and try to clean that up in the code revision process, because I think it would be probably easier from our perspective if we had all of our boards and commissions within the title that we are regularly reviewing. So that's more just purely cleanup kind of a thing. So sorry for the sausage making process, but wanted to just describe that. That was one kind of overriding goal, just for the ease of our use, and frankly, folks in the state who want to know, hey, what is IDEM doing related to recycling? And they're probably going to look in Title 13 and then go on a wild goose chase to try to find it somewhere else. So there's still, I think, some opportunities to clean up some things, but just wanted to give that example as well. But let me go back to what Josh said and see if there's any questions that folks may want us to answer. Sorry for being long-winded. Obviously, we get way too much to share, and we drive Lindy crazy by talking too quickly about this stuff. But I wanted to just see if there's any questions that the board members may have.
A lot of really good information. Thank you both. So the reporting requirements that you were talking about, that still deals with like government agencies, right? Like solid waste management districts. There's nothing that was added in there that's asking businesses to report recycling.
I think those, we've got some more flexibility in the frequency with which businesses are reporting recycling information to Tom and the team, and that I think matches up with kind of our current practice. So it will not change the quality or value of the information we have, but provides a little bit more flexibility on when they submit.
Just when the local government agencies submit. You know, we as a board would like to see what the businesses are doing, but they're not required, right, Tom, to report information.
Right, we track recycling facilities, and businesses are generators of recyclables.
Right.
Whereas the recycling facilities, they actually move it from collection to end-use market. So that's where we track the numbers.
Very good. And I guess another question, you know, I started to try to read 277 and what's lot. Are there cliff notes anywhere, or, you know, is there something, because I am interested in the changes in policy.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely have a lot of, you know, 1-pagers, 2-pagers, 3-pagers on it. We even have a section by section breakdown that kind of puts it even into more layman's terms. So one of the goals of the Friday Book Club was to also make Title 13 more readable as a whole. So that way, you know, you wouldn't have to go through a bunch of attorneys to understand what Indiana code says, that the average person can go look at that, understand what Title 13 says. But yeah, we definitely have some information we can share and distribute through like Carl or Pam.
Okay, I mean, is it on the IDEM website, or?
I don't think there's anything posted on the website necessarily.
Okay. Well, if there's something that you can share, I'd love to be able to read that.
Yeah, sure.
And I think there probably are some publicly available things we can share too, like the LSA sort of summary of the bill that might be helpful too.
Yeah, so on the IGA website, you know, Legislative Services Agency, which is like the bipartisan team of attorneys that actually draft legislation and all that, they have what's called a fiscal impact statement that goes along with it, which goes far beyond just talking about the fiscal impact of it. It does a really good job of actually breaking down what the bill does. That's something that's readily available on the General Assembly's website.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you both for your work.
Thanks so much.
If I can just reinforce one of Sandy's comment, it really is important to get businesses to report what they're doing, because especially if you want to get 50% at some point. When this was revised originally, the whole reporting requirement, businesses went to the, I would say, the extreme to make sure they didn't have to report. So it's going to have to be done legislatively.
And I know we've got the materials management plan on the agenda, so I want upstage Pam's report out there. But one thing I did fail to mention with Earth Day is we did yesterday release, for my money, what is not only the best annual report item has ever done, but the best annual report that any state environmental agency in the country does. So we have a whole new format for that, and part of the goal of, for us, some of the reporting requirements that have been consolidated is to have something that people can read. So it's 25 pages, we released it yesterday, it's very pretty.
I saw it, it's very nice.
Statistics and other stuff, so if you have the chance to look at it, it's on the main page of the IDEM website. But lots of issues, you know, and certainly around the work that you all do, there's several examples, but some things that you may not know that IDEM does, and attempt to try to capture both our history and our office structure, our leadership, some of our exciting programs. There's lots of great images that Aiden's taken over the last year, but it covers calendar year 2025. We'd love for you to take a look at that, and if there's things that we can be doing more there, but some of it is realizing if we file a 1,000-page report every year to the legislature and no one ever reads it, and maybe we can do a little bit better, meet people where they're at, since they're reading things on their phone and don't actually read the phone reports.
One of the hang-ups that businesses had as to why they didn't want to report was how to handle proprietary information. And I know the working groups at that point in time spent a lot of time trying to deal with that issue, and there are ways to deal with it, but that was one of the reasons why they didn't want to.
Something might be worth looking at, 'cause there's been a lot of change when it comes to confidential business information or other proprietary information, or how we can tackle that.
Well, like you said, you can't eat the elephant all in one bite. You have to take little bites, and you gentlemen seem to be doing a great job at it, so thank you.
Yes, on behalf of the board, Commissioner Woods, I found the overview very comprehensive and inspirational. And I wondered if there was a requirement on a job application for Mr. Bain to have his track shoes on. Obviously, you guys are moving at a very fast pace, so thank you. And I really appreciate your time this morning and what you're doing.
Thank
So
you.
it's an exciting time in the state.
Thanks so much, and thank you for your service. We really appreciate the work you do.
I'm so new, I don't have a card, but Carl and Pam can certainly send you my contact information.
It's gonna be on recycled paper though, isn't it?
Digital business cards.
Yeah. I'm a texter anyway, so.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you very much. All right, the next item on the agenda is Mr. Woodridge. Hello, Carl, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Thank you. Clint covered a couple things already. So he mentioned Bob. Bob's moved over to the Department of Natural Resources, so I'm doing a couple jobs right now. And also, if any of you ever worked, you probably maybe didn't, but Elizabeth Admire, who was a long time attorney for IDEM, is chief of staff once upon a time, a long time, like 25 years ago or more.
Oh, just saying.
She retired at the end of January, and so I'm also wearing an additional hat of, she was also one of the two natural resource co-trustees for the state of Indiana. She was appointed in that role almost 30 years ago by Governor O'Bannon. And so she retired. I worked very closely with Beth for many years on natural resource damage program as a technical person. So Clint and our secretary have appointed me to replace Beth in that role. So I'm also wearing that hat now too. And so I have a technical staff person that works out here at Shadeland on that program with me. And that program works with DNR, who's our co-trustee. Chris Smith, who's a deputy director over there, is the co-trustee with me at the state level. And then the federal trustee is, used to be at the Bloomington Field Office for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Several years ago, they decided that formal appointment should be the regional supervisor for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I think it's Region 3, and their office is in Minnesota. So he is technically the sort of signatory on resolutions to spend settlement money. But Susan Cooper, who's the head of the Bloomington Field Office, is sort of the local representative for the trustee. So if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it. We've done a lot on the Grand Calumet River in Northwest Indiana through a large settlement there and partnering with EPA under the Great Lakes Legacy Act to clean that river up. Or at least start it. We didn't have enough money to actually do the whole river system. Some of the local communities are stepping up there. We've also had Will Foster, who's online, I believe, joined our recycling team, is on Pam's team. He's our eCycle program manager. He started in December. I think I neglected to mention that at the January meeting, so I apologize, Will, that I didn't do that. He came from within the agency. He was in our Office of Land Quality as a geologist for almost 10 years. So we're really excited to have Will on staff. He's been working really closely with Pam and getting up to speed on the eCycle program. And he actually coordinated his first e-waste collection event. We have one annually in the spring at the Government Center downtown, and mainly just for state employees and the state agencies if they have, old electronic equipment laying around that they don't know what to do with and they are looking to recycle it. So he coordinated that event, which was held, what was the date of that, Pam? April
April 15th.
15th? Yeah. Thank you. I couldn't remember the date. And we collected 12,540 pounds of e-waste just from state employees and state agencies that were looking to recycle electronics, which is the largest amount I think we've ever collected at the government center for that spring event. So, you know, extra kudos to Will for making sure that, you know, folks in the government center complex were aware that that was happening. So, and then Clint did mention too that Mallory Medellin is our new Northwest Regional Office Director for IDEM in Valparaiso. She has been with us a couple years. She was previously working in our Compliance and Technical Assistance Program. She has a law degree and was in private practice out of a large firm in Chicago as an environmental attorney. So she has a lot of great knowledge and experience that she has brought to the agency and to that office in particular. So I'm really excited to be working with her in Northwest Indiana on the Grand Calumet River and our Lake Michigan programs, and you know, seeing what she'll do in that role. And then I know you all know Pat Daniel, so I was successful in sort of bringing her back a little bit. She went and retired and took a couple of vacations, and then by the time she got back from said vacations, she's like, Carl, I have a couple more vacations I'm planning. So she's been on, I think she's on her third vacation since she retired. She's taken several long cruises, and so she's really jumped all into the deep end of retirement, which is awesome. But we have managed to bring her back in between her vacations for a couple of days a week to sort of help with, you know, transition all of her institutional knowledge of 38 years, which was, you know, significant loss for our office. And we've got folks like Tom who have 35 plus years and, you know, is probably going to retire in a couple of years. All three of our environmental engineers in OPS have 35 or 40 years with the agency and with the state. So, like Clint mentioned, those are my primary concerns on, you know, succession planning for our office and our teams, because our other two both are environmental engineers in compliance and technical assistance, so they've been doing that work for a very long time. So when they both decide to retire, we will definitely have a significant loss of institutional knowledge there. I mean, just between the four of them, it's like 160 years of knowledge almost, of experience. So that's a lot to lose in a short amount of time. Additionally, we also had, I was excited that we had a presence at the Indianapolis Boat Sport and Travel Show this year. Just recently at the State Fairgrounds, my couple of staff in the Northwest office that work on our Lake Michigan programs were really wanting to have a presence there, and that's, you know, sort of a prime audience for folks who go up to Lake Michigan and recreate. So we had a really good turnout. We engaged with a lot of folks from the public there. We even got some interest in some of our voluntary recognition programs in our office too, like our Clean Marina program. And then just two more items. Our environmental stakeholder engagement program, we have historically had two folks working on that, one in our Northwest office, Raheem Evans. He left in November. We haven't yet backfilled that position because we're going through some changes. So, but Herb Ingman is in our Indianapolis office and sort of carrying the weight of that program right now. But he's been continuing to meet with mayors and municipal partners across the state, and he's also starting to reach back out to some of the local neighborhood associations around the state that he hasn't yet talked to when they were doing some of that work initially 3 years ago when he first was hired on. So it's been really successful. No other state agencies are sitting down and meeting with mayors and to mostly just listen to see what kind of concerns they have that they want to, and questions they have for us as an agency. So it's been a really good exchange. And then on top of that, I think those those meetings have also resulted in us having a whole bunch of additional interest, I think, and spurring interest in our Clean Community Program. We've had 4 new communities just in the last month and a half that have joined the program. I just got 3 more emails of new communities. City of Indianapolis is one of those that has an application in to join the program as well. So Missy Shaver, who runs that program for us out of our Southeast Regional Office, is doing a great job in getting around and talking to those sustainability folks in all of these communities across Indiana. And then finally, Clint mentioned the Compliance Advisory Panel. One of our CTAP staff kind of wears the hat of a Small Business Regulatory Coordinator, so Samantha Nunnery is in that role, and so Clint has tasked her and Julie Rhodes, who's our section chief over CTAP, to work with the Compliance Advisory Panel when we get it kind of reinvigorated. That panel hasn't met, I don't think, since 2014. I think was the last time I saw that I could find minutes for when they met, and I think they met for 4 minutes to review and approve our annual legislative report, and they convene their meeting, approve the report, and then adjourn. So Clint has had experience in his prior work with compliance advisory panels and sort of what that Small Business Regulatory Coordinator or Ombudsman, as sometimes they are called, around the Clean Air Act requirements. So we're reinvigorating that. She's sort of branding her outreach efforts around what we're calling the Crossroads to Compliance. So trying to help small businesses comply with the Clean Air Act. So those are, I think, most of my updates. We do have a bullet point on there about the augmentation question that kind of came up at the January meeting. I did have some dialogue with our Chief Financial Officer, Brianna Towler, around this and asked the question. I was doing some additional re-researching the Indiana code again for the board, just to see, what it says or doesn't say. And it really doesn't say one way or the other anything really about augmentation. And I think I brought this up when we've talked about it before, in the Indiana code, I think it's 4-23-5.5-6, which is duties and powers of the board. Item number 4 is the language, annually prepare an administrative budget for review by the budget agency and the budget committee. So, we have our biennium budgeting process, which I know Brianna has recently mentioned that they haven't had direct instruction yet from state budget agency around looking at the biennium budget ask, because the next session will be a budget session. So, but we are internally in OPS working on our spend plans for our current budget for the next fiscal year, which is essentially the same as this current fiscal year that will be ending soon. So we currently have, the $2 million allocated in the budget for the Recycling Market Development Program grants. The budget bill does allow for that Recycling Promotion and Assistance Fund to be augmented to the agency, because there is, I don't remember what the exact figure was, I think it was around 16 million or so in the legal fund, in that dedicated fund. So, if we have grantees that don't spend all of their money, or if somebody were to back out because they're struggling to even spend it once you guys have awarded it, that money doesn't come back for us to necessarily be able to reallocate it somewhere. It ends up rolling back into that larger dedicated legal fund, they call it. So as far as augmentation goes, I think you guys can ask for more than the $2 million through the budgeting process. I think we also, could work with you to augment it at a point in time that you want to do that, I think. The way that the budgeting process works for a dedicated fund like this is, and it's in the statute too, is that essentially the appropriation that we get is based on the expected revenue for that fund annually. So we won't get anything more appropriated to us unless you guys probably ask for it. And I don't know what that process would be. That's a little bit more of a legal question that, if Michael French was online, could probably answer a little bit better. But I'm assuming you could, have to make a motion and make the ask, and we can go to the budget agency and ask for it potentially, but not 100% confident in exactly what that process would look like. But yes.
I don't think we've ever were aware that we could go ask for additional funds. We have done that kind of indirectly by talking to the legislators that are on this committee and saying we'd like to have more money. But it's been quite a while. I don't recall ever being told that we could do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, the way that it's written in the IC 4-23, to me, I mean, it's the board annually prepares an administrative budget for review by the budget agency and the budget committee. So that tells me the board can say, this is the budget we're asking for, and submit that through us to the budget agency and to budget committee ultimately. And that would be Grignani doing that sort of on behalf of the board, I believe. So that's the way the Indiana code reads. But again, I think we do typically end up augmenting, I think, a little bit to that fund, because between salaries and our administrative expenses, plus the $2 million for the grants, we usually end up spending a little bit more than what gets allocated or appropriated to us every year for our budget. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
How much money's coming in every year?
It's roughly $2.5 million. I think it's like a 2.54. I'd have to look.
So it's been over the last few years. Is right
Yeah,
around $2.5 million.
it's been pretty flat since I've been in this role.
I can't remember what specific grants I'm referring to, but it was the last couple of years, if we didn't spend the money, it was our impression that it went back in the fund, we couldn't touch it.
Was that the Central Indiana Waste Diversion?
Yeah. It was during those cycles. So this is all kind of new.
Yeah, I don't remember the don't touch it. I mean, it's in the recycle. It goes back into the Recycling Promotion and Assistance Fund, which is the dedicated fund where that fee
remember,
goes.
we were trying to. We didn't allocate all the money, and we were wanting to know whether or not we could roll that over into the next year, and there was vagueness there as to whether or not we could do that. So
probably with that initial legislation, because I think that had just passed when I came into this role. You guys ended up getting the additional allocation of funding because there was a second piece of legislation like a year later, correct? I think in the 2024 session.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think we did
It was
end
the
up
23 session.
getting that back.
yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the second piece of legislation allowed you to spend any money that didn't get awarded under that initial bill, and not to exceed, I think, an additional $2 million.
Because it was specifically
it was a
written
total
that
of
way.
6.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So back to what you were reading in the code. So you don't think we will get more than what is brought in?
That's the default
That's the default,
for the appropriations.
but we can ask for that much? Yes, no? But and then you said you go over your allocated budget sometimes, and so you use money from that fund? Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct, yes. Our CFO would go to state budget agency and say, we need an augmentation of another $50,000 for the end of the fiscal year, because
see.
our expenses are greater than what was appropriated, just based on salaries, and we're pretty frugal.
Sure.
But, so if we, as a board, decided, in the next year's cycle, we wanted to try and award $3 million worth of grants, we could request that?
I believe so.
That's how it reads.
That's how it reads, because it says annually prepare an administrative budget for review. So it's not saying that you have to follow the budget cycle process of every 2 years with the biennial budgeting process. It just says annually prepare an administrative budget for review by the budget agency and the budget committee. So, and you know, the next item is on the materials management plan, which Pam was going to talk about. But you know, one of the things we were talking about the other day is, you know, this is just my opinion and suggestion, if you want it or not. You can take it or leave it. Is, you know, we're trying to finalize this materials management plan. We've got the Swiffer grant funding, which is that solid waste infrastructure for recycling federal money. There's a second amount of money coming potentially, but we haven't even done the pass-throughs for the initial funding we received in 2023, which we promised we would do at least 10 pass-throughs to solid waste management districts to take the statewide plan and localize the plan for solid waste management district. So to me, that, you know, maybe you guys want to think about strategy around that plan and those local plans and how you want to spend the money that's in the fund.
More money's good.
It's just a whole different world for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm always trying to keep it in the bank. My wife is the one that's taking it out.
Yeah, I mean, that, when I had my back and forth with Brianni, I mean, that was one, and I support that word of caution, which is, you know, our revenue is a certain amount of money, and, you know, if you wanted to do something, you know, I wouldn't say we want to spend $3 million on grants every year, because you're going to spend that money down eventually to the point where you're beyond what the revenue is.
But for
So,
a special fiscal
Yeah.
year, because we've all seen, you know, that 60
Right.
million just sitting there. And yeah, I think maybe not every year, but once in
Yeah.
a while, it would be good to say, hey, let's strategize and maybe we can get some bigger impact projects or more projects
Yeah.
than what we have the funding for just 2 million.
It's an interesting dilemma, how do we advertise that? Because I agree that, I mean, we have surplus available. It would be great to be able to bring a high-impact project in, within reason, obviously. But if we need an additional $2 million or additional $3 million, you know, to bring something like that in, that's a little bit of an excitement, you know, that, you know, comes to us to deal with and makes a significant impact on an immediate level. I mean, and obviously, listening to the commissioner, we better get moving, or we're gonna get left in the dust. Because he's a fast talker.
Do we ever look at the economic impact of some of our projects that we fund that say we give $500,000 to a company and they bring in 100 jobs because of that? Do we ever take that into account and say, okay, well, you give us another $1 million up to $3 million, the economic impact is, you know, these companies are bringing more jobs, helping out.
So we do collect the data on the job creation as part of the final closeout, but I do not believe that there's an end point of doing that, so I'm not really sure how that data has been used in the past.
I'm just thinking that might be one way for us to say, this is why you need to help us or give us more money to improve recycling, is because we're also bringing in jobs. Would that be a good way to sell it?
But you're still saying we can't spend beyond what the fund is bringing in, right?
Well, that's the
Unless
default.
it's, unless, that's the default, unless it's a special circumstance. I mean, what if we only asked for what is brought in? And so that's one question, and then the other is, you mentioned the Swiffer grants. Are you saying, I'm not quite sure what you're saying about those, that's an additional, that's federal funding,
federal
right?
money, correct.
And so we will need to help allocate those monies, correct?
No, I
No.
think what
No.
he meant was kind of like utilizing the MMP plan that we have for the state,
Yeah.
which was funded by the SWIFR, and the ability of local entities to also get their own local MMP.
Oh, I see.
And based on that, kind of like restructure the RMDP plans with some special allocation.
Yeah, because the purpose of the solid waste infrastructure grant funding from 2023 was to advance the nation, pushing us towards the 50% recycling diversion goal nationally, which is also the same goal that we have at the state level. So the focus of that materials management plan is looking at, you know, what are the things that will push us closer to that sooner? Like where are the opportunities to do that? And then the idea behind the pass-through funding is at least 10 solid waste management districts. I think we have interest for more than that. Because Deanna had done a sort of just a query, like send us a letter of interest if you are interested in this funding to do this. And I think we got about 18 entities that send us letters of interest. So you know, we'll have some local planning that'll be done over the next year and a half-ish, depending on how quickly we can get our MMP finalized and get the RFP out the door and get people busy working on those local plans. And then, you know, those local plans and the statewide plan can help potentially be a tool for the board on strategizing how you want to spend money,
I gotcha.
especially if you want to do something bigger, right? But obviously you all bring expertise from private sector and other places, you know, solid waste management districts at the local level that we don't have as IDEM staff necessarily. So, I mean, that's why you guys exist, right, as a board to award these funds, and not necessarily, it's just something that us as an agency are doing and awarding funding, because you guys always have a lot of great questions and critique all those proposals you get annually with a little bit different lens than, say, us as IDEM staff. So,
I think it's also our responsibility to promote the program. So I think we have to remember that when we're talking to, you know, through our networks, you know, within the state, what opportunity may come to Indiana, you know, if this is available. So we always need to look for that next big thing. Well, thank you, Carl and Pamela. I guess you're next on the agenda, but
Yeah, so just a couple of updates on the materials management plan. We had a couple of hiccups around submission of comments from our legal department and all that stuff. We went through a couple different revisions. So we were able to receive those comments and finalize it, and all of that was sent out to the vendor a couple weeks ago. So now the ball is on their corner to kind of finalize and push this through to the end. We were initially, because the original scope of the contract was to just complete the MMP, we did not expect for it to become the actual adopted materials management plan for the state. That did increase a couple of costs in the contract. So we were required to add additional funds towards the contract. So we have been going through that process itself. There were some changes to law on procurement and contract law last year that IDOA is still navigating. So they have been placing a couple of roadblocks in our way towards getting this contract amended. Thankfully, this amendment is made it to the vendor for signature on Tuesday. So things are moving along. We were able to extend the contract out until June 30th, 2026, hoping that we don't know if it's going to be a sufficient time for the vendor to be able to complete all the revisions, but we will be able to also amend it if need be. On the SWIFR side of things, we did receive notice from the EPA back in December or February that we will be receiving a second allocation. So round 2 of the SWIFR, we will be getting close to 598,000, which is an additional 26,000 from our first allocation. This additional allocation does come with a couple of requirements from the EPA. Some of them being that at least 40% of the allocation needs to be utilized towards the purchasing of equipment or construction. So that's close to 239,000 from that total allocation. And then the rest is really up to us to design the program around. So what we have decided is to utilize some of that funding for a statewide location campaign that Jennifer, our recycling coordinator, will be leading around promotion of solid waste district recycling services. And then the remaining of the funds will be utilized to help municipalities as well as solid waste management districts to complete the MMPs, their own localized MMPs, because there's such broad interest in getting those updated locally. That's the update on that side of things. I mean, we're excited on that. The round one first allocation, all of that was delayed, so we're still waiting for the MMP to be completed in order for us to launch that program and make these funds available to solid waste districts. So we are waiting on that. I'm having assistance from Will Foster, our e-cycling program manager, on designing that application as well as any materials the solid waste districts will need. That's my updates on that side of things.
Very good, thank you very much. Well, thank you. Seems like you got a very full slate today.
Yeah.
Let's see, are we down to the,
Position.
yeah, then I guess the,
Number 6.
we made it past item 6, correct?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Okay. So I believe that's under your name as well.
Yeah. So just an update on the vacant position that we have for the Recycling Market Development Program Manager. An extension has been offered to a candidate. That person is currently going through background check and employment verification with HR, SPD. SPD is also currently working on the salary equity side of things. So hopefully I should be receiving good news in a couple of weeks as SPD gets all of that wrapped up. Of course, the salary comes through as well, and the candidate agrees or does not agree on that salary. So potentially we'll have this new person starting the earliest on May 11th. So I'm very excited for you guys to meet this person. If everything goes okay on the background check and the verification as well as the salary, this day will gain a lot of knowledge on composting side of things. So this person has a lot of background on composting as well as recycling and experience in program management. So that's my
Good. Thank you. And so now we're down to the item 7. And Pam, do you want to go over the status
Yes.
and updates?
So from all fiscal 2026, grantees submitted their reports. We had 2 grantees that completed their closeout. We have Waste Management Facility that we attended the ribbon cutting back in April 10th. It was a really nice opportunity for us to go in and see the equipment that you guys funded. It was the glass equipment, and seeing how just like a small portion of your efforts are going through a big project impact. The Indiana Airport Authority is also getting ready to finish out their closeout. They did receive additional funds from the CRGP grant to kind of continue on their curbside assistance and recycling expansion throughout the airport. Tom is working to put together the site visit and get that project closed out. As of our stragglers from fiscal year 2025, we have 2 grantees that are in need of an amendment. The Richmond Sanitary District received bids a little delayed as they were expecting, but they're moving forward with it regardless. So I don't see any issues in extending their contract or their grant agreement. And then we have the Smith Creek grant that I do want you guys to share some wisdom here. They have had some very significant issues through their grant implementation. One of them being that their plan that was originally selected for implementation was shut down for over 4 months because of an UPS airplane crash. And so their engineering team has been dedicating a lot of efforts rebuilding that site. They were also required to obtain a solid waste permit to install the food packing unit, and they do not want to apply to the solid waste permit at that facility. So they are trying to figure out if there is another location for them to actually implement the project. Their grant agreement is due to expire September 26th. The maximum amount of time they will be able to extend that grant agreement will be a year. So we either extend it over or tell them cannot do. So any thoughts there, guys?
Well, I can offer some thoughts, but I want to make sure if it's appropriate. I have a relationship with that company. I can share a bit of insight if you'd like. But I was not able to vote on that award. So, and I won't vote on the extension. But their goal, they purchased, or they were purchasing a machine that will take packaged product and put it an organic, like if you got a pack of bologna, put the pack of bologna in there, it shreds it, takes the plastic out, the bologna goes in the organic compost. And it's quite interesting in all honesty. And as an old landfill manager, I can tell you when out-of-date product comes in on tractor trailers, there's a lot of material that could be handled like that and recovered and kept out of the landfill. So I was very excited about the project and watching it develop. Now, when the UPS plane went down, yes, it basically the nose of the airplane ended up in the entry of their facility. Very tragic incident, but I don't know that it's even fully open currently. I think there's still a shutdown on Gray Lane, the major road that runs through there. So they have struggled with that. And the fact that it's not an easy thing to get a solid waste permit, to handle the material. But I can tell you that it's my opinion, and take it for what it's worth. If there's anybody that can do it, it's their company that would be able to get it accomplished. They're highly regarded in the community, and they do things the right way. I don't know if anyone here has ever taken a tour of their composting facility, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
If money comes back from a grant, does it come back in the fund or does it get reverted?
It goes back to the recycling legal fund, so we won't be able to touch it again.
We'll sweep it back in.
Yeah.
And if we were to extend this and they had further delays, at that point we could cancel it.
Yeah.
I mean, the maximum that we can do is like 4 years for a grant agreement. So
I mean, it certainly seems like it's no fault of their own.
yeah, for sure.
At very extenuating circumstances, I also thought that was a really compelling and interesting project. I would like to see it continue.
Yeah.
So I would go for the extension.
I agree.
Is that a motion, Kelly?
I move to extend.
I'll second. Go ahead.
And how long is the extension?
A year?
So a year could be, I believe it was 18, but I need to check with Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could also be 18 additional months, but I do need to check with the legal counsel on that.
So the motion was to extend for what period of time?
As long as I need,
As long as you can.
or yeah, as long
Up
as
to the
we can.
legal, yeah.
Okay.
And we have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
I guess I should abstain. Those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, and we'll just track it, and again, it's one of those projects where it could make a huge difference that we're kind of looking for.
I'll work on that with Michael then. Kind of like just under this agenda item that we're going towards, I did wanted to provide kind of an overview of our fiscal 27 RMDP grant program. So the bulk of the recommendations that Diana introduced at your last board meeting have been already incorporated into the application guidelines, including the budget sheet that has been added to the web form. We have also maintained the same levels of funding range that you guys utilize for the fiscal 26. Same eligibility for applicants, so will remain municipalities, solid waste management districts, nonprofit organizations, institutions of higher education, public or private business located and operating in Indiana. And priority materials will remain for plastics, mixed glass, organics, and electronics. Diana had also proposed to assess the need for better aligning the evaluation criteria and proposal criteria. I have not had time to do that as prior to this meeting, but I would like myself to go through you guys' my first year with you all. Just kind of seeing what the conversations are, the application submissions that we see, and where that disparity might be at, so that we can better make an informed decision on where the gaps are. So that will be a project that maybe we'll bring forward next year.
I just would like to throw some information in on that, because I think I was the one that brought that up. When you look at attachment B, the scoring criteria, I mean, it is definitely noted in the body of the application and the guidelines, that the proposals must contain all the information outlined in attachment A, and they will be evaluated in accordance with the criteria listed in attachment B, okay? But when you look, I think, because I have filled out one of these grant applications before, and so I can relate to this. You follow these questions in attachment A, and people may not always go and look at attachment B and go, oh, wait a minute, I need to say how I'm going to positively impact local economics. Okay, so the scoring criteria,
It's not listed.
well, and I don't know that it has to be listed verbatim, but maybe just under like attachment A, under A, project description and scope of work, the project scope and methodology, it does say, be as specific as possible, but maybe just reference, look at the scoring criteria and make sure you are answering all those questions. Because I know that I've gone through the scoring criteria before and go, well, they don't really answer that part of the scoring criteria. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Sometimes you have to hold people's hands, right?
Yes.
To get better quality applications, which we want.
Yeah. So that's just where I saw a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just from kind of the look of the application packet, I did change some components of it, mostly the appearance of it. So now it has a nice cover page and a table of content. And we are hyperlinking kind of the attachments where those are underlined, and it just has a little bit of nicer look, I guess. And so hoping that this will just clarify some of the instructions for grantees as well, catch their eye a little bit sooner, instead of just being lost. So there's that in that set of things. And then I did wanted to talk about proposed timeline changes for the RNDP program moving forward for the next year. So because we have the RNDP program manager position vacant, I would like the opportunity for the new person to come in and get a little bit adjusted before I throw her into the fire. So for those revisions, I put this little chart together of the dates that you guys were shown back in January 22nd and the new proposed dates. So the main dates that are changing is board approval plan for grant proposal, hoping for that to happen today. The posting of the application guidance, instead of it opening May 13, it will open June 17. We're going to have CRGP kind of use the time slot that would have been for the RNDP program. And then deadline for submission of proposals, instead of it being June 24th, it will be July 29th. And approval of awards by the board, instead of reconvening on October 22nd, 2026, I would like to propose December 10, 2026.
Makes sense. I figured that's why you were doing that for the new person. So I'm okay with it.
Obviously, we've discussed it, you know, I'm supportive of the changes. How does it work with people's schedules? I mean,
Where are you going, Kelly?
we've got the world traveler here.
So December 10th, I'm in the state.
Oh, cool.
You're in the state, are you in Indy? This schedule actually works a lot better for me, honestly. So I like it better. Because usually I'm on fall break during that time. I can't make these meetings sometimes.
Yeah, it works for me.
Good. Hearing no issues. I think that's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We talked a lot about that, and you know, it'd be ideal for whoever, you know, the person that we're hiring to really sort of go through the whole cycle of the grant program right out of the gate, instead of coming into it when the RFP is already on the street or about to go out on the street.
Yeah. You can't do it all, Pamela. I mean,
Unfortunately, you cannot.
all right. I noticed in the packet, I'm looking at our terms on our listing of board members. And it looks like we're all expired. What did we ever find out about that?
So the governor did do a couple of appointments for every other board but us. I did chat it with Josh, and he said he has not heard from the governor's office about any future appointments. So,
Yeah, Clint and our secretary and Pardon Stover, who was our chief of staff, is now the secretary's chief of staff. You know, they've been bringing it up regularly, so they're aware. They just are trying to do a lot of boards and commissions appointments and a lot of other things. Obviously, the legislative session really took attention away from a lot of other things. So I bring it up regularly too. So
We had the same situation on the board I work very closely with, and we found a contact, and we've been getting ours done within a matter of a month or two. Like, it's been very fast. And then like we have vacancies, we're getting it done in no time at all now. So I can pass that contact along if you're interested.
Is that like
Yeah,
a
and I think, you know, also
professional
in the mix
finder
is
person?
staff,
Yeah, he's
staffing
phenomenal
approvals,
with the
so,
governor's office.
you know, appointments such as my appointment as a natural resource trustee, like that is, those are the things that are in their queue too, so they're dealing with all of those changes with heads of agencies, assistant commissioners, types of deputy commissioners, et cetera. Any of those appointed positions in the state agencies as well go through, you know, a process. What that process exactly is, I'm not sure. I just know it takes a while. It usually takes several weeks.
I just want to make sure that any action we take as board members,
Yeah,
that
no,
we're
I
protected,
agree.
because,
Your
you know, there has to be some type of protection or coverage here that we're not acting beyond our, you know, allocated approval zone.
Yeah. I'm hopeful, you know, I'm gonna start pushing again and asking every time I meet with our chief of staff, who's, you know, my direct supervisor right now is Hillary, our chief of staff. So, you know, I bring it up every time at this point. So, because I too, it makes me nervous to, you know, be doing grant awards, and when, you know, we have to put on the agenda that you guys technically expired. So, and I, you know, if you all want to, as a board, consider additional funding and whatnot, like having that appointment being made for another term is important in my mind as well.
Maybe if we go ahead and ask for that additional funding, it'll bring attention to us, and then they'll say, wait a minute.
Could be.
We've got a couple vacancies we need to
Yeah,
talk about as
they're aware of
well.
that too. Yeah.
Bruce, I'm training the next one right here.
Yeah.
Do you
What's the
see
sleep
how-
on the job though?
Osmosis.
I want to say something, but I'm afraid I'm going to disturb him or her.
Well, I want to know what kind of tranquilizer.
Yeah, what kind of puppy lays there like that? I know, I've never seen this.
A good one that's adoptable.
Ah.
That's
Nice.
dangerous.
Is that a sales pitch?
Yes, yes. He is a foster. He's looking for a home.
Ah.
All right, let's see.
Home trial? We've already got one. I got one like a velociraptor.
So are we down to number 8?
Yes.
Plan for grant proposals? Does anyone on the board feel there's any need for changes for the grants themselves? Or the grant proposals? I think as we go through that, we may want to keep it in mind, you know, and this is a topic that needs to be brought up immediately thereafter awards, so that we can get it in the process and, you know, advertise as such, you know, in advance.
Yeah.
So let's always think about any changes that need to be made to make the process better. We don't want to get stagnant. So with them there, and obviously the new dates, you know, we're able to get that agreed upon. Is there any other business that we need to discuss? Hearing none.
Bruce, is there anything you guys want to see on the agenda for the July meeting specifically?
July meeting's always a tough meeting because that's calm before the storm meeting. So,
I mean, by then, we will have that materials management plan finalized, so
Do
that can
we,
be an agenda item to talk about.
do we have any potential grant recipient site visits? I think we've done that some years.
We have done that before, yes. Something that we could look into as well.
those are always really exciting to see what's, the actual impact from the grants.
That would be great.
And I believe we'll have our new addition to the team on board by next meeting. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And I want to say, Pamela, thank you. You've been obviously very busy. And I don't know if Carl's been pushing you that hard or if he's running right beside you, but you guys are covering a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, she's been fantastic, so she's gonna do a lot of good work for us, and I'm excited about, her bringing the new person along with her too, so.
let's say it's a new phone number that comes in, so
Yeah.
I think I kind of know when you're calling.
Yeah, that's,
Feel free anytime.
thank you, Marissa.
Any other discussion items, board members? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
And Mr. Gretz, like a second?
Terry, second.
Terry said second.
Terry? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. It's kind of an exciting start to the process this year.
Can I get a picture real quick, sent to my girlfriend?
Opposed is priceless.
I don't know that they will.
I didn't really have to
I know.
snatch it down.
So
Although I don't know that. I
thanks
will.
for letting me be a little out of the ordinary today. Our senior dog had an emergency surgery